What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by comic creator Dan Panosian. Welcome to the show,
Hey, how are you? Thanks, Greg.
man.
Appreciate you
I'm
having me, man.
I'm excited to talk to you. You just had a book come out a couple weeks ago, Black Tape, and I read it from AWA, and I was like, man, this is great. And I've been familiar with your work because you've been in comics for so long, and I was just like, all right, I got to talk to you about just your run in comics because you've been involved with a lot of stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a lot of different hats, in this business, but all of them fun. It's been great.
So I want to start just before we get into Black Tape and Canary and some of the books you're currently working on right now. How did you get into comics? Have you always had a love for comics like growing up as a kid, or is this something that you kind of came into later?
No, it's interesting. I mean, I hear stories from people where they're like, "Oh, I didn't pick up a comic until I was, such an age." And for me, as early as I can remember, I've been into comic books. My dad, he was a commercial artist, but he wanted to be a comic book artist, and he would come home from work, and he'd always have like a page. It looked like a coloring book practically, but he'd have a new page of like a Batman story he'd draw, and he was like showing me like, hey, this is John Buscema's artwork, this is Neil Adams' artwork, this is Joe Kubert's artwork. Here's John Buscema. Like he definitely had good taste, and so I was very into it from that age. He introduced me to Frank Frazetta, and I think my way of wanting to impress him was like to do that, to like get his attention, you know.
Yeah,
So
that
I've always wanted to do. I think by the time I was 14, the Marvel comics, How to Draw Comics. No, that's their instructional book. But they had a book just called the Marvel Comic Tryout Book, and
okay.
I tried out for Marvel Comics at that age, and I got a great response from Marvel. I think they thought I was a lot older, and it was super encouraging. I showed the thing to my dad, and he was like, "Wow, you make more money than I'm making right now." And then, I had to let Marvel know. I was like, oh, I'm 14 years old, so I don't think it's going to be happening. But it was encouraging. And then when I was older, I moved to New York City, and the fellow had written back to me as a young kid. He was now a actual editor. He was no longer in the submissions department, but he was editing comics, and I got some of my first work there from him.
That's that's crazy. So you literally entered this thing as 14 and you're just like, oh, by the way, I'm not old enough to qualify for your thing, but
Yeah.
remember me.
But keep me in mind. Yeah, it's always good to follow up. I think his name was Len Kaminsky. He's no longer working at Marvel anymore, but I drew him like a thank you drawing of Spider-Man saying, thank you, Len. And oddly enough, like I went into his office, he had it up on his wall, in the back there, like a little fan drawing from a kid. Um, so I'm glad he did. I'm glad I did that follow-up drawing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like, so how did then so obviously you were inspired by comics as an early age and then you entered the Marvel contest and then but you were still 14 at that time. How did you then, when you said you moved to New York, how did you get into kind of like, okay, this is something that I want to do for a career here?
Well, I mean, at 14, I knew, and then I started working for. I was really into Dungeons and Dragons, and there was a role playing game called Villains Vigilantes, created by Jeff D and Jack Herman. And Jeff D he was like one of my favorite artists on Dungeons and Dragons at the time, and so I got into that, and I started doing illustration work for gaming companies, and I started doing like very, very indie comics work. Like I Malibu Comics. There was a branch of Malibu called Eternity. While I was in high school, I was doing stuff for that, BattleTech. So I was kind of building my experience up more and more. And I got out of high school, and I always had it in the back of my mind, like, man, I think I could probably go work for Marvel. It wasn't like they said you're guaranteed, but they almost said like, yeah, if you want, here's what we pay, here's our insurance. They made it sound like
Yeah.
you could be, but I was still very nervous about it, and I didn't pursue it. I just bummed around. I was doing construction. I was waiting tables. I was driving a truck. No, I wasn't driving like cross country, but I was like a big like delivery truck. I was delivering
Yeah.
and stuff. But um, I finally got to this place where all my friends were growing up and I hadn't really grown up yet. And I was like, well, you have to see what this is all about. So um, I was lucky enough to, you know, I went to I went to a comic book convention basically the day after I got to New York and met with Walt Simonson and Neil Adams, and Walt hooked me up at Marvel, and that's how I got in. And Neil Adams gave me some work right away, working with him. Working with Neil's fantastic because it's like going. I never went to art school, so it was like going to art school every
Yeah.
day. He hated everything I did, and with good reason. It sucked. So it was great instruction. You
Well,
know.
you mentioned art. You you do writing, you do art. Like when you decided you wanted to get into comics, did you have a leaning one way or the other that you're like, this is what I gravitate towards, or were you just kind of like, whatever?
Well, no, I wanted to be like John Byrne, Walt Simonson, Frank Miller. I wanted to be a guy who did everything,
Yeah.
even like a Will Eisner. Those guys are telling their stories. And I think that's the purest form of the art, is when you see something like that. Um, I was mentioning earlier to another fellow about like Simonson's run on Thor. That's a definitive Thor run.
Right.
Frank Miller's Daredevil's the definitive Daredevil run. Anytime he's involved with it or was involved with it, that becomes that. And um, that's why I got into comic books. That's why I love comic books as much as I do. I wanted it to be. I wanted to have that career. So every day I'm writing or drawing comic books, it's like I'm a fan, and I'm living this kind of experience. So it kind of keeps that excitement level there for me.
Yeah. No, it's so cool because it's interesting to see like, I've had creators on who, have done one or the other, who have done both, but like there's even times like with you, it seems like you do penciling, sometimes you do inking, sometimes you do the whole gamut with like, I think was it slots where you did everything?
Yeah, I
Um,
did. In all the books that are like creator-owned books,
yeah,
I do the logos for. Richard Starkings developed a font based on. He did it for a lot of different artists, where you can go to his website and you get like a Jim Lee font, or in my case. So when I do a book, usually I request like my font is used. So it's the closest way I can have. I'm also a control freak, so I want to be involved in everything. And
well, that makes sense then if you're a control freak, kind of, to have that idea of, well, you're doing the storytelling, you're doing the art, you're doing everything because, it's you, and you probably have an editor still that's helping you out with that. But how do you then, as someone who likes to control, give that up a little bit when it's like, with black tape, you're just writing and Dalbor is doing the art, and fantastic artist. I know he's been on Hotel and Casual Fling, and but yeah, like, so how do you separate that then?
well, I mean, that's interesting because I am a control freak, and I don't play well with others. But oddly enough, when it comes to comic books, and I just Dalibor, I get those pages back, and it's nothing like how I would approach the page, generally speaking. Some of the art directions there, or some of the panel sizing, I'll indicate like how I want it broken up. But how he actually draws, I it's I'm like a kid. I feels like a kid again. I'm getting it in. It's exciting to see, and I'm always pleasantly surprised. So I've been thankful because I'm really kind of a harsh critic, like especially more of like myself. And I thought going into I've worked with three different artists now on different books, and it's all of them. It's exciting. I like it.
Well,
Um,
I love that you mentioned that about his art because I had Dalbor on a while back, and we were talking about one of his books and Hotel, and he was talking about how basically he was wanting to draw the hotel as a whole nother character, and like it's so interesting to see, like, to give up that control of like where you're like, I would have done this, but what this creator is bringing to this is fantastic. And so like it's exciting to hear you say like, I'm a kid just like getting these pages going, oh wow, yeah, this is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And then when they get colored, and then when they get lettered, it's just like, oh wow, I guess that's a comic book. It's neat to see.
I mean, you've been in the game for so long. Do you still get like, as someone who loves comics, do you still get excited when you see those like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
this is my pages. This is my
yeah,
creation coming to life. And
yeah. I do. The only thing I don't do is I don't have like my artwork all over the house. I just have everybody else like who I'm a fan of.
yeah,
Basically, it's like a ton of Frazetta, like that wall over here. You can't see is all Frazetta. You can see the Molly Hatchet Frazetta standee there from when I was a kid, and that was from the record store I used to go to. A bunch of Arthur Adams on the wall, some John Byrne. There's another Frazetta right there, up
oh,
there. Um,
that's
but
cool.
yeah, it's I'm a huge fan. It just kind of keeps you excited. It's a shame when people get a little jaded in the business, and I just feel like I got a long way to go as well. You know,
Yeah.
I hopefully I'll continue to improve and get better, and emulate some of my heroes artistically and maybe in the writing field as well.
Well, it's so refreshing to like to hear like how much of a fan you are, like that you're collecting art of people that inspired you, and as fans, that's what we do. We collect art of people that inspire us and works and things like that. You
Was
mentioned
that page you got up there by yeah.
this is it's an original piece. It's by a guy named the Bearded Comic Artist, and he has all the Jokers
Oh, cool.
from the different Jokers from the movie. So I have some of his artwork, and then I have a couple pieces from Ty Templeton because I'm a big Batman the Animated Series fan.
Mhm.
And I've got some frameworks from of like the production stills and things like that. Those are kind of things I gravitate towards because that's what got me into comics as a kid was the Batman the Animated Series. So I tried to,
A good series too.
yeah, it's so
Yeah.
good, gravitate towards those things that I liked as a fan that got me into collecting. And it's cool to see. You mentioned like you've been in the industry for a long time. How do you keep yourself from becoming jaded? And like you said, like you're not jaded from this, and you're still enjoying it.
I mean, I think it's the internet kind of helps quite a bit. Being online and being on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and seeing what it's like going to a convention as an artist. When I go to a convention, each booth an artist has an artist alley, or even if it's a retailer booth, um, you're seeing the best of their work from all year round. It can be a little defeating, but it's also very inspiring. And so when I go online and I see amazing artwork, I'm like, man, it's just like it pushes me to want to get better, and it kind of shows you that things are possible. So I use that to kind of just really inspire me. Maybe there's almost too much inspiration out there, really.
That's you're the first person I think I've ever had on the show that's like, well, the internet has helped me kept me afloat. Like Twitter, I've gotten
Yeah,
usually it's the other way. I'm like, oh man, social
yeah.
media has destroyed my love for comics
Well,
because
I mean, it can definitely do
yeah,
that, but yeah, no, I think when you're using it for good,
yeah. When
it's
it's used for good and
yeah,
not these YouTubers who are going in and they're bashing my work, and then it's great.
yeah. No, you can get a lot of trouble online.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's so let's talk a little bit about Black Tape. The new book from AWA. Where did this idea start from? If someone hasn't gotten to read Black Tape, what's it about and where did it come from?
Well, it's kind of a Alfred Hitchcock sort of Roman Polanski, like Rosemary's Baby, in a very vague sense. I mean, that Rosemary's Baby is about this woman who is pregnant. She doesn't realize she's pregnant with this child of Satan, and this is kind of in that same vein. There's this rocker from the late '60s, early '70s. He's that persona of like, oh my God, he must be a Satanist. Like when I was growing up, like band Kiss, it's like, oh, they're Satanists. Um, you know, but when Ozzy Osbourne, he ate a head off a bat. He's elite with the devil. So there was a lot of fear attached to that
Yeah.
from society. It's just like anything, like when rock and roll, when Elvis came out, like the generation before was like, oh my God, this guy couldn't be worse. He's going to ruin the world, and so on and so forth. But we came from a place of a lot of purity from the 50s, and the 60s happened. It was a bit of a rebellion with that, and then the 70s was its own type of weird amalgamation of at the end of the 70s, we had Star Wars. So it's a big, big leap. But people were still very much afraid of Satanism. And I kind of grew up a little bit during that time. I was a 70s kid. So it was that. My dad loved like the movie Billy Jack, any type of Charles Bronson film, and Clint Eastwood. And so it has, have you ever heard of Billy Jack?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Oh,
the movie Billy Jack, right?
yeah, yeah. So it's not a good movie, by the way. Although I have a 3-sheet poster, like the thing's 7 feet tall in my house. It's my wife's like, it's a great, thank God this is a good looking poster, because the movie's not her cup of tea. But no, so I kind of amalgamated all these different genres into Black Tape, and it's about this rocker who dies on stage within like the first 3 pages, and you know his wife, who's just very naive, young, and there's nothing really about him, is kind of left there, and the record company believes there's another tape he's made, another recording, and they think they're all Satanists, so they want to use it as a portal to contact Satan himself and the devil, and maybe bring him here. And she has no idea what's going on. She doesn't know where this tape is. She doesn't know who she can trust. And it's a nice character arc for this character, because it's she's a young girl from Florida, and now she's thrust into this lifestyle in Hollywood, which is just full of evil and corruption at its highest level.
What so it seems like a little bit you pull from experiences and things of growing up in that time frame and stuff. Where is it for you as someone when you get into writing? Like, do you have like kind of a folder of ideas, or is it just like,
Yeah,
this is my idea, and I keep it, and I run with it until something comes
yeah.
from it, or nothing?
Well, it depends. I mean, I have a lot of ideas of folders of scripts, like outlines of things, and what's right for one publisher is not necessarily what another publisher wants. Like I had this one idea, and now another publisher is going with it, and for the longest time everyone was like, it was just no's on that thing across the board. And then I started mentioning it again, and virtually everyone I've talked to is like, oh my God, yeah, it doesn't even have to be a comic book. And living in LA, it's everybody's dream is to get something, a movie made, or a TV show, or a Netflix streaming thing. But that's the type of thing where now there's a lot of excitement about this latest thing, and I'm like, oh, nobody liked this 4 years ago, but now 5 years ago, now people like it, and I'm grateful. So we'll see where that stuff goes. It's all it's kind of exciting,
Yeah.
but most of it's not superhero stuff. It's all kind of loosely horror based, except for something like Slots, which has kind of a crime noir, urban crime feel.
Yeah, it seems like you got, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you got your start doing a lot of art on superhero books, but then as you've been able to branch out, more, it is more on the horror mystery genre for you. Canary, even the art projects that you're picking, it seems,
Yeah,
it's very much different than what you did earlier on in your work.
yeah. I don't know. As a kid, I'd be super into. I mean, I was into Blueberry when Mobius was doing that, but and I was into Western films, but I wasn't too into Western comics. Like if Marvel put out Kid Colt, it wasn't like I was gonna pick that up necessarily, or DC. I wasn't like a huge Jonah Hex fan either.
Right.
Um, but then they redid it, and there's some really cool Jonah Hex stuff out there. But that wasn't what I was into when I was a kid reading comics. I'd look at Jonah Hex like, not for me. But now I think comics have changed quite a bit. Like you'll find creators that you trust doing these other projects, and you kind of take a chance on them. Like if Eduardo Riso was going to draw almost any genre, I'd be curious to see what that was, and particularly if he's working, with his usual team like Brian Azzarello.
Right. How do you then, as diverse as you are in your portfolio, how do you decide what projects that you want to connect with, and what publishers that you work with? Because I know, you're working with AWA here, but the Canaries with Comixology Originals, you've got Alice Ever After was with Boom, like, and then all your stuff with Marvel, DC. Like, how do you figure out what publisher to bring different projects to?
I mean, kind of like what I said, where like I'll pitch them a variety of different things, and in Boom's case, they're very specific about what they want. And I'm sure I pitched Black Tape to Boom, and they passed on it most likely. It's just not what they thought they could, what their strengths were, or maybe they hated it. Who knows? But when I pitched it to Axel at AWA, immediately he's like, "Oh, I get it," and fans of the X-Men aren't necessarily fans of Harlequin, so there's something out there for everyone, and
Yeah.
and there's publishers out there for everything, and being in the business for as long as I have been, I have enough relationships with different publishers and editors that I can kind of go to this stuff with.
No. So with like your creator stuff owned that you write, like Black Tape, and Sauce Evera, like those are stuff that you pitch to them. Like, what about when, how does it work out for something like Canary where you're doing the art
Oh,
for Scott Snyder, and like, I'm assuming, did someone reach out to you with that, or is that
yeah,
something you
well,
and
Scott
Scott
did.
work together? And
Well, I'd met Scott, and of course I was a fan of his. I read American Vampire and Raphael Albuquerque's, the stuff, and I looked at that and I was like, oh my God, I'd love to have drawn this. And Raphael did such an amazing job. Like, I'm a fan of that guy's work, and I was like, this looks so cool. It was just badass stuff. So I've been following Scott's work for years, and not sure how we met, but we had spoken. And then one time, I think we got together at a convention in Dallas with myself, Donnie Cates, and Scott, and who else was rummaging around with us? There's a bunch of us like kind of rummaging around, and we started started talking. And he goes, "Man, we should work together on something." And I'm like geeking out, going, "Oh, Scott Snyder wants to work with me," I'm all all excited. um, you can't say no to something like that. It's particularly when it's a horror western,
right,
and the freedom he gave me to, he's very, he's a guy like that, writer of that caliber, when you're talking about like Brubaker or Brian Azzarello or Rick Remender, and any of these big names in the business right now, they can dictate the terms, but Scott is very, very gracious in the way he allows so much freedom and inclusion as far as like if you have an idea.
yeah. So how geeked out were you then when this pitch came across you of a horror western? Because just the 30 minutes I've spent with you already, I feel like this is like, when this was sent to you, you're like, yes, please.
Well, I didn't even hesitate. Yeah, it was a yes. I mean, quite frankly, I would have said yes to anything, but Scott was like, after us actually hanging out, he's like, I think I get you a little bit, and he's like, this might be perfect, and also based on the type of drawings I just do for fun. I don't know if you've ever seen like the drink and draw stuff, but me, Dave, Jeff, and I, we just kind of draw what we want to draw, and just have a blast on that show. And it turns out like those drawings from Drink and Draw are probably the most detailed and fun drawings I do.
Speaking of, you brought it up, so I want to talk. How did Drink and Draw come about?
Oh, well, Drink and Draw was like, I think a lot of artists would drink and draw at a pub or a bar. And I'd been doing it for a long time, just drawing pictures of the band, and I'll draw a picture of a band, and somebody will come over and go, "Hey, can you draw a picture of me?" And you just meet people that way. And Dave Johnson, Jeff and I are good buddies, and Jeff and I kind of knew Dave from animation. And Dave was like, "What if I drag you two married guys out? How can I get you away from your wives? If you came back with some drawings, it won't be just like we're out getting in all sorts of massive trouble. We're obviously, in one place." And he goes, "We'll call it Drink and Draw." So it was Dave's idea to bring us all together as an excuse to be able to get us out. And then Jeff and I loved it, and it started in like 2005. And from there, we just kept inviting different comic book guys or different animation guys or different storyboard guys. And within a few years, chapters were popping up all over the country, all over the world. It's nuts, and they all call it drink and draw, which is like part of the vernacular at this point. It's insane to think about.
It's so funny. I feel like, and then 2020 hit and everyone was doing drink and draw.
Yeah, you can't do it. That's why I was like, hey guys, what if we did a YouTube show? There's a lot of that all these comic book YouTube shows are popping up, and I was like, man, we could do that. It's a good way for us to hang out, just the core guys, and we can invite cool guests that we're fans of. That usually, since we're lucky enough at the time, we're all in LA now. Dave and I are in LA, and Jeff moved, but a lot of people would come out to LA. So whenever another artist was in town, we'd invite them to drink and draw, and they'd have a lot of fun. But this was a way to kind of virtual drink and draw. It's not the same. There's an energy at a bar. It's the lighting's bad, but you're meeting people that aren't even in comics that are just like, wow, it's everybody's there. You're at a bar, you can drink at home. But if you're at a bar, you want to be social, and that kind of gives you an excuse to be social.
Yeah, there's a reason you're at a bar to be drinking, because it's a lot cheaper to do it at home.
Oh yeah. So everyone has found out. Everyone's found that out in the last like 2-3 years, right?
You're like, oh man, the amount of money I saved in 2020, which then didn't happen because then I was buying all the comics on eBay because I couldn't go out. But it is what it is. So So do you have a leaning of where we've talked about how you are really just diverse when it comes to creating comics, of writing and inking and penciling and all of this stuff. Do you have a preference if like you're only able to do one that you gravitate towards more?
Oh no, I mean, like right now I'm writing 2, sometimes three books at once, and but I can only draw one. I do a lot of covers for different companies, but I can only draw one comic book a month, and I can barely do it. It's not even that. It basically comes out, I can draw 3 pages a week of sequential artwork and one cover, and then on Friday I color those 3 pages. So what's that, like 15, or it's not much. It's 12 pages a month of sequential artwork. It's not quite a comic. If I cut out the covers, I guess I could do it, and someone else was coloring, I could do it. But I'm too, like I said, I'm too much of a control freak to let somebody else do it. Why would they? They're trying to take some fun away from me. I can't have that.
Right. Yeah, and well, you have some really great covers. Like I've got Chicken Devil one on the back here, and I got your Suicide Squad.
That was a lot of fun. Kind of a little sad cover there, huh?
Yeah, it is. I've never felt so much pain from a dude in a chicken mascot costume.
Well, when they sent me the idea, and I know Brian Isolado, and I read it, because I got to read a PDF before I did it. I'm like, man, that's a great comic. I think something you'll find, like there's going to be some things happening with that outside the comic book industry, and but I was like, man, to be the dude in the chicken suit, it's going to come with a price. That's why I was like, he's crying. He's like, this is my life. All right.
Yep. So do you have because again, you have spanned across the universe when it comes to comics. Do you have something that you gravitate towards when it comes to art that you're like, I really love when I get an opportunity to do this type of art style or this even character?
There's probably 3. But I love the cowboy stuff. I love crime noir.
Yeah.
So like even if I was to do like a Logan story, it would be like kind of a crime noir, kind of gritty urban sort of thing. Even if it was like, I guess urban's not the right word, I guess just that kind of more gritty side of life, whether it's in the city or in a rural sort of Route 66 sort of thing. But yeah, I gravitate towards that a little bit more. I do like fantasy, like with anything Robert E. Howard related or Tolkien. I was a big Dungeons and Dragons fan, so I like all those worlds. I'm not as big into, although I like it, sci-fi. I don't think I'd be great at that necessarily, unless it was something I could just completely develop my own visual language for, you know.
Yeah. So, I'll wrap up here in a little bit. Respect for your time and stuff. Question though, I was thinking about. You mentioned earlier that you hadn't gone to art school. So, how did your art style formulate? How did you figure out who you wanted to be as an artist?
Well, my dad would put all these great artists in front of me, so
Yeah.
I got to see great artwork growing up. And he didn't want me to be an artist, but he would kind of critique if I do something that looked wrong. He'd tell me. He's very good at critiques. And I just I think I kind of have a bit of a photographic memory, and so when I'm drawing, I'm seeing a lot of Buscema while I'm drawing. That's what tends to come out. I don't have the artwork in front of me per se, but I think just years of reading Savage Sword of Conan and seeing that it's influenced me quite a bit. Frank Miller stuff, Simonson, and it all kind of finds its way in there. And then when I got out of comic books, I started taking life drawing. That was like being an instruction. And the brief time I had with Neil Adams, Neil was a great teacher. I mean, he broke everything down for me and corrected everything. I'd bring in pages, and he early in the morning, and he'd have taken the pages I brought him from the following the meeting before, and have just redrawn them completely. And but he showed me why what I did wasn't working, and I was just inking back then or doing finishes, but it was just those same lessons that you can get from inking can be applied to drawing as well.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. Well, Dan, thank you so much just for taking some time to talk about comics with me. Obviously, right now you've got Black Tape coming out. Canary issue 5 just dropped, or
Yeah, just
okay,
dropped this week. We're working on the final large, insanely cool. I don't, I know how the story ends, but I don't have the entire story per
okay.
se yet. So I'm kind of excited to see how exactly Scott ends it. From a fan perspective.
I am too, because I was it's funny. I was I reached out to you a while ago about when Black Tape came out and was talking about like, hey, let's have you on the show. And then instantly, like 2 days later, my inbox, I got my review copies for Allison for After Trades from Boop. And then like a week later it was like Canary issue 5, review trade. I was just like, it was a sign. And holy bucket, so like issue 5 for Canary, I was like,
Yeah, that it all kind of comes together for that issue. It's a real slow. Canary is literally a slow burn,
yeah.
and then by the time 5 rolls around, it's like, oh, holy shit! Like all this insanity is happening, and the final issue is, dwarfs number 5. And there's actually, I think, more pages too. So I can't wait for that trade paperback to come out.
Oh,
That's gonna be fun. So
oh,
yeah,
I'm
Black Tape is coming out. Black Tape is finished. Dalibor is just drawing the very last issue right now. Um, and then I have a few other secret projects with Boom and another publisher also with Mad Cave. And those are also being simultaneously worked on. And there's a collection of this book called John Tiffany, which was I drew a couple of years ago. It's a European book, and they combined 2 volumes together. So it's a 120-page oversized graphic novel, and that's coming out with brand new pages that have never been seen before. So
nice. Well, Dan, where's the best place people can follow along with you to keep up with because I mean, you seem like you're working on something all the time. So how can people follow along with what you're creating?
if you're on Twitter, it's Urban Barbarian, and then you have to do a big brain leap on Instagram, also Urban Barbarian. So Urban Barbarian was a mean supposed to be a mean nickname for me, but I kind of liked it. So
I love it. I love it. So, well, Dan, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to just talk about comics with me. And gang, if you are not checking out Black Tape by AWA, by all means, go check it out. Get it from your local comic shop. Canary is on Comixology right now. Go read it, and then just look at all the other stuff. we could have spent hours talking about all your projects that you've worked on, but I wanted to focus on some of the originals. I'll have you back again sometime. We'll talk about some of your other secret projects that we can't talk about yet.
Oh, I love it. Thanks, Greg.
All right. Have a good one, Dan.